Welcome to the September 22nd Budget Committee meeting. I'd like to start it off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, real quick before we get started, Amy Thompson had a family emergency and won't be here, so I will be running the meeting for her. Mike Lang is also excused. He's battling what Blue is battling, and hopefully Blue doesn't spread it.
No.
And then Craig Dion is out of town on business. So that's it for attendance. As far as welcome, I would like to welcome Patricia Denmark, our new secretary, who will be taking diligent notes for us tonight, who already has started. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And so basically, just as far as real quickly approval of the August 25th meetings, I'd like to have a motion to accept the meetings.
So motioned.
Second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any revisions? I have one. On page 4, the paragraph that starts, Mr. Fournier stated that enterprise funds are the water and sewer department. And the sentence basically says, any surplus realized goes back into their own fund balance and does affect the general fund. There should be a does not in there. That's the only one I caught.
Done.
Any others?
I think this was taken pretty much out of Steve's presentation. So I don't know if his presentation was wrong. Nope.
Okay. Nothing else? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as revised?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Motion approved.
We're still to vote on this.
So, all approved?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay. And then, old business as far as budget law. Any remaining questions or anything from the budget law workshop you'd like to bring up? All good? All right.
I just had more of a procedural question in learning about what our role is moving forward. If somebody gets off topic, not off topic, that's the wrong thing, but if we're having a conversation about Steve wants to hire a new policeman or something like that, it's not really up to us to make judgments on the policeman's that position itself, but we're just reducing the bottom line. Is that?
I think the understanding that I had is we can ask the questions. We necessarily can't dictate what they do in the different account lines. We do the bottom line, but we can absolutely ask the questions around some of the things there.
I would agree. So your questions, your opinions on whether it's good or bad are fine to voice.
Okay.
But you don't have a vote on what actually that item is.
Right.
We only have one vote at the end.
On the budget at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. New business, Mr. Russ, you have some CIP updates for us?
Yeah. We're just getting started. We've met twice, once for an organizational meeting. It's a new committee this year based on the revised town charter. So there's 6 official members, 2 members at large, which are Rosie Quacks and Jane and Judy Ryan. Were appointed by the town council. Jane Ford, who is representative of the planning board, Nate Lunny from the school board, myself from the budget committee, and Phil Mazzaro from the town council. There was an issue at some point, I think Steve will figure it out and get it resolved, that the way the town charter was stated that an ex officio member, at least on the budget committee, appeared to have a vote where they shouldn't have a vote, so we're no longer looking at our assistants like Diane Hardy or Steve or anybody else who sits in as ex officio members, then there may have to be a town charter change, because apparently Robert's Rules of Order says ex officio members have votes, so unless you specifically state they don't, you can't use that term, as best as I know. We also had a second meeting for a lovely 4 hours last Tuesday, listening to the department heads. And we pretty much had everybody do their first pass, including the library. It was their first time there. And so we're still reviewing the information. The school is on a separate track, so as a result of the school being included, and we're still looking for a calendar from, I think, you or Mike or Gail. The town had a deadline to be able to provide the information to Steve Fournier at his request on October 1st, so he could then present his budget to the town council, I think, by October 15th. They look at it, and then they have to get us a budget by November 15th. So the CIP for the town, we need to do our review and make recommendations by September 30th. So they can have it back by October 1st. We're meeting again on 6/25 to discuss what we heard last week. So we discussed with the department's head to get education, but we haven't discussed with the committee yet. We're looking at a 6-year time horizon, which is sort of new this year. So the committee's new, how we're approaching it is new, and we're having a good dialogue, I think, about that. We're looking for some missing parts. We got some asset listings from each of the committees, but one of the issues was like real estate. How much real estate does the town own? What's its value on our books? Are there projects for maintenance that should be there or are there and be part of the capital plan? Because sometimes those may have been not even mentioned. Sometimes they may have been part of operating, so we're just trying to get our arms around all the assets. The school, we're looking at a separate schedule, so when their deadlines are, I don't know. This is their first time through the CIP process. So we have 2 meetings set up for 9:25 for discussion, 9:30 if we need a little more time to make a final decision on the town. We're hoping maybe the 9:30 date or shortly thereafter we'll get started with the school, but we don't know when their calendar date is to the budget committee, which should then get pushed back to the school board having to make a decision, which should then get pushed back to you guys making a recommendation to the school board. So we have no information yet on the school, but they're hopefully going to participate this year for the first time in the CIP plan. And that's it. So we're off and running, and stay tuned.
So when you say 6-year, it's more of a forecasting, trying to be
Yeah,
a forecaster?
there's a form, we may make some, the town's approach in the past has been to say, I have a project out in the future. Let me start funding it now, because we don't, CIP, just for those who may not be familiar with it, and I'm learning as I go, all CIP does is make a recommendation on how much money should be raised this year to contribute to the CIP funds, of which there are about 15. Okay, there's a fund for fire, and there's a fund for this, and there's a fund for that, et cetera. The actual spending of the CIP money is the town council's purview, either by budget or during the year choosing to spend some of that CIP money. So all we're doing in CIP is trying to say, where do you think you need to raise capital for a project now or a project 5 years from now? So let's say somebody is saying, I think I want to correct a drainage issue. I may not need to do that for 5 years, but I think it's $100,000. So over a 6-year plan, they may be saying, we'd like the town to contribute $20,000 a year for the next 5 years, so that when we get to the 6th year, we'd have the $100,000 available in the capital fund and wouldn't have to charge the operating fund or the general fund to do that project. I'm not sure everybody's on that page. So we're speaking with the department heads and Steve, and we'll figure it out. But our role is, like last year, I think CIP recommended to fund another $400,000 or $500,000 or $600,000 into the fund. It was cut back by Steve. I think it was further cut by the town council, and they only added like $100,000 or $200,000 to the total capital fund, even though we may have spent more than that. So, as I said, we're getting our feet wet. I don't know if that explains it, but basically there would be this, if you look at equipment versus a project, there is some semblance of useful life, okay? So if there was an asset that they said should last 10 years as a dump truck or whatever, and it's in its 9th year, then they'll usually be giving a condition report and probably asking for a new truck that hopefully they have money or put money aside for the past few years to be able to buy that truck. So that's the best I can tell you. Stay tuned now. Usually with the town, this was over by October, and there were 3 or 4 rush meetings to meet the deadlines. Now that we have the school as well, we're going to be extending CIP, at least for the next month or two, to have them get their feet wet, have us get engaged, and so there's no end date other than the town October 1st.
When they owe us the budgets and stuff like that. Okay. All right. So next up, Christine Bluen from the school district. If you want to come on up and SAU and give us an update.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me this evening. It's not all the time that I get to be in front of you and say I've got great news. I'll explain the chart just so you understand what you're looking at. So what I gave you is analysis of our fund balance. We have different funds. The general fund is known as the budget that you all approve. And then we have food service. We also have federal funds. We have other funds which are considered our local grants that we get, like the Harmon Fund, the NECP. Yep, those are our other funds. And then we have the trustee of the trust funds. Those are our capital reserve funds that we have similar to the town. So the first one is the general fund. I know you guys are all looking at that bottom number, so I'll just jump right to it. The fund balance from the prior year, the school year 13-14, it was $722,052.68. So we wrapped up a very good year. The way we get to fund balance, for those who are not familiar with the process, we take our, we received more revenues than we expected, or we've spent less money than we budgeted. So those two factors will derive the number in terms of what you have for a fund balance. This year, we had our revenues exceeded about just over $206,000.
So the $16,431,000, that's an actual now, or
That's an actual.
is 200 and how much above what you budget?
For the revenue number?
Yeah.
Roughly 206,000 more in revenues, which is all up into that 16,431. So if you're looking at that, the unreserved, the 198,890 is the unreserved fund balance from the prior school year.
Which you can't hold, right? That is a credit to...
That's a credit, no, it was returned to taxes. We can't hold it like the town does, not until next year, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. So that was what was reduced to the tax rate, but we actually we show it on our balance sheet. So we have the unreserved fund balance, the 198 from the prior year. The revenues we received is the 16,431,363, and the expenditures is what we spent. So then that would give you your net gain or loss. The 496 is just the difference between those two, and then adding the 198, which gives you to the 695. This long-term disability credit.
Yeah, just a
Sure.
question. On the 15,934, which was the expenditures, that was under budget as well?
Correct.
By how much?
Roughly 527,000.
And should we ask questions now, or?
Nope, hold on.
Okay.
Just hold your place. So, and then I'll just quickly explain. We had something come up this year, which is what you see for the long-term disability credit. We have a long-term disability policy in the district, and we had, unfortunately, we had one individual that had to participate in that program. And so there was a question that the district asked the provider, who is Cigna, to say, there's this return to work provision in there, and so we wanted to take advantage of that because this employee did come back to work at part-time status at the beginning of the school year, and then unfortunately he or she was out for the remainder of the year. So we actually challenged that and we won. So we ended up getting a credit. So that's the credit that you see there from 26,000. Where it gets really kind of confusing is it's actually a credit that goes back to the 12-13 school year. because the employee did not work this past year, so that's why it's shown differently. I kept them separate because that's how our auditors asked us to show it, so that's what the long-term disability credit is for. And that's why it says June of 2013. So then that gives you the net, the $722,052. The revenue, I just want to talk briefly about, just the $206,000. Majority of that came in from Medicaid, was roughly about $86,000. That was, if you might have recalled, at the beginning of the school year, we had a significant special ed increase. So that just meant a few extra dollars than we anticipated on the revenue side, so to help with some of those expenses.
And the 86 was better than
What we anticipated.
for Medicaid.
More, yep, correct. We also had a student from Barrington that was part-time, so we received roughly about $10,000 for that particular student as a tuitioned in. Our earnings on investment were roughly $9,000. Other local revenues, which you're probably familiar with on the town side, is the Health Trust, used to be known as LGC, for the health and dental returns. So that's what that is. And also E-rate money is in there for us, okay? Then we had charter school, roughly $7,000. The long-term disability credit I talked to you about just briefly, which was $26,000, and then the rest is kind of miscellaneous things that have come through. We've collected money for books that were lost, things of that nature. Okay, so that's how we derived at the excess revenues that we did not expect. Now, on the expenditure side, to your question, Russ, was roughly about $527,000. Largely in part that is comprised of two things. One was health insurance. This was the 13-14 school year was the first year that we had a new teacher's contract, which had this buyout change that gave an incentive that was kind of tiered based on the plan that you opted out of. That actually saved the district quite a bit of money because we had more people participate because we raised those levels. So there was an incentive for them to opt out. So that was in the district's favor.
How much of the 527 was?
About roughly $125,000.
And is that a net? In other words, if I understood last year, if people opted out of the insurance, depending on whether it was family or single or whatever, they got like $2,000 to $3,000 or something for opting out.
Correct.
So is that a payment that, and you may save $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000 from the insurance premium, right?
We save more than that. We save, on a family plan, it's roughly about $18,000.
Okay.
Okay, and then on a two-person plan, you're looking at about anywhere between, we have 3 plans, so you're looking between the range of $11,000 to $13,000, depending on that. And a single plan can be anywhere between $6,000 to $9,000.
So are we budgeting two separate line items? One that says, here's the buyouts we're anticipating, or so many of
Yes, they are.
these, it's 100,000. And what you're saying is we exceeded what we spent on that because more people signed up, so we spent maybe, I'm trying to think, $30,000, $50,000 more because more people opted out, but the offset to that was lower insurance.
Correct. Now, that's not, just so I'm clear, it's not, the whole $125,000 roughly isn't just due to that opt-out. There was some other factors, such as with staffing changes, we do have people that, they get married, their kids age out, things of that nature, so it's the whole big picture. But a large part of it was the buyout, but you'll see it in the budget, we budget those two items separately.
Okay, so that's a net number, though? In
Correct.
other words, the 125 covers the fact that we may have spent more on
Correct.
the opt-out?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Great question. So, and then the salaries, unfortunately, we did have quite a few employees that were out due to a medical leave. And so we were able to diffuse some of the costs by utilizing long-term subs, current staff, we moved some people around. You might have heard, like, I'll give you an example, one of them was the librarian. We were very creative throughout the year, and I'm glad to report now we actually have a dynamite person in that position, so, but those are some of the things that were driven by that number. You won't see those being carried over from one year to the next because we have filled those positions like the librarian and the tutors and the teachers and whatnot,
So
so.
we'll see this like on a hit for this year. It'll
You'll
be
see it for
saved,
this
but
year.
necessarily
You'll
not-
see a small savings due to some staffing changes next year, but not a hit like this.
Not like this.
No, this won't carry over.
And how much was that of the 527?
237,000.
Okay.
And then the benefits that correlate to that, the the New Hampshire retirement, the FICA and all that, if you add that all up together, it was roughly almost $70,000 for just that too.
Okay, so we're at about 307. was for staffing and benefits changes.
I'm at 360 and
237.
70, so call it 420 with everything.
237 for staff expense, 70 for benefits.
25,000.
Yeah, so.
Oh, plus,
I'm
yeah.
just- Yeah, I'm just ballparking it. The fuel, we budgeted at a rate a little bit higher than what the bid came in at, so we were able to save roughly $38,000 in the fuel. And you will see that decrease in the budget going forward because our rate is substantially lower, so, and we're going to be under contract soon. The electricity, same thing. It was roughly about $20,000, and we did just put in a new system at the elementary school, which is a controlled system. So we should see some additional savings there from the upcoming budget as well, from heating and from electricity, because now we can monitor the building electronically now instead of having to go into every single room and monitor that. And then we have the kind of just catch all the miscellaneous money. So those are just the small things here and there that we didn't spend. It could be professional development, it could be course reimbursement for an administrator, and those sort of things. The next column, food service. We started, the unreserved fund balance was roughly $29,945. You can see the revenues and the expenditures. And then you can see that we actually ended in the red last year, about almost $18,000. So we are we took a hard look at what the program, what the changes, what that might have been incurred last year. There are things like, the raises, benefits that are part of that. The cost of food was significantly up. The changes from the Healthy Care Act, which means we have to provide more fresh fruits and vegetables, cost more money. We had students who didn't want to take meals, so we were not able to claim those meals as reimbursable meals. The participation was down, so we've looked at, menu changes. So it's a variety of different things. And at some point, if you like to know more information, I can go into further detail, but I don't want to get into the...
But just a question,
Sure.
the 29, the 198 in the general fund is money that is returned as a credit against the budget. At
Correct.
least for now, until next year, when the new general fund gets in, right? To the
Possibility,
school.
yep.
Okay. But food service being a separate revenue and expense item, the 29 is a balance. If you underspent in the past, you
Yep.
have, that's what created the 29,000
It
surplus.
just carries over.
Right,
It's like
and
its
that
own
surplus
self-revolving
allowed
business.
us to absorb the extra 17,000. So now the surplus is back down to
The
about
surplus
12.
is now, yeah, exactly. And if we had another year that we were in the red again, then the general fund has to bail out the food service program.
Thank you.
Yes. So federal funds, as you can see, we only spend what we get, so that one's really easy. Those are federal funds. The other funds I was talking about, like the Harriman funds,
Downstairs.
NECP,
Downstairs. Yep.
those just roll over. There's no particular end date when the money is used, it's used. And we continuously get money throughout the year. And then the trust funds is just what we have remaining in our current trust funds that you're probably familiar with.
Could we get a list at some point of the trust funds because you have, what, about
Yep.
8 or 10 of them?
No, we don't have that many. We have repair, I think we have like 5 or 6.
Say 5 or 6.
Yeah. We get the repair and maintenance, we get the school
Technology.
technology, the dual purpose, the utility, and I know I'm missing one. Expansion?
we-
I
we
said
ask-
special ed? Okay, special
Yeah,
ed.
we ask for 4 at the end of the year usually, right? The 25%,
Yep.
so.
Yes, I think we have 5 or 6. 6.
Okay.
So yeah, I can give you a list. I have it broken down, so I'd be more than happy to share that with you. So I'm just going to flip back to the general fund real quick. So you might have recalled we had 2 warrant articles on the ballot in March. One was for $50,000 to use June 30th, 2014 fund balance, up to $50,000 in the special education, and one was repair and maintenance. Okay, so of that $722,000, $100,000 will be put into those 2 funds. Okay, so then so that would leave $622,052 roughly that would go to reduce the taxes. Okay, we also
Say that again? How much?
$622,052.68 to be. We also had a warrant article that was the 2.5% retained fund balance. Okay, so that will actually take place next fiscal year. Okay, so that will come into play June of 15. Okay, so which means at no point can we have more than 2.5% of the fund balance in that account as well. So,
But as an example, if that won't take effect till next year, so this 622 after the 100 grand that was voted on goes to the two trust funds. We have 622 that would be, you'll build your budget this year, and against that, we'll have a $622,000 credit from last year
that's correct.
due to the underspending.
Yep.
If the general fund that was approved for next year was implemented, and it's not automatic, I think it's the school board is the one who decides,
That's correct.
but they could, just from a calculation point, take about 2.5% is the max of the expense budget or the revenue
No,
budget?
the name is slipping my mind at the very moment. It's, what you do is you take your, it's the district assessment. So you take your district assessment, and you add in the local tax, okay? You add those two together, and you multiply that by 2.5%. So it doesn't take in the SWEP, which is the statewide education, sorry, it does take in the statewide. It does not take in the other, sorry. It's the district assessment and the statewide education property tax. So it's just local property tax that we raise, but it does not take in the my God, adequacy aid. Thank you. Getting mixed up, sorry. It does not take into consideration that, okay, which comes from the state. You take 2.5% of that. So this year, roughly, if it was to take play, it was roughly $323,000. At no point can you have more than that cap, and that cap changes every year because it's based off of that percentage.
That's what I wanted to get
Yes.
all of us come, so if it's 320,000, then you're saying the magic number, whatever you got to, was about $15 million? Because 2% of that would be $300,000, and the other half would make it about, what, I guess, I'm just trying to figure out where the 2.5%, but if the number was 320, then you're saying, and the school board decided to build their general fund to the full extent they could, which would be $320,000, 2.5% of that budget number from last year, then we still would have had a $302,000 surplus that would be credited against next year's budget, but 320 would be now put into a new general fund for the school board to use if it chooses in the future.
That's one option. That's
Okay.
an option, and that's a discussion that the school board would have, because it's up to that amount. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to keep anything. They can return it all. They can keep a portion. They can keep 1%. They can pick a number out of the air, and that's what they could determine. So it's really a discussion that the school board would have. They would make that determination, and then that money would go into that fund.
And then each year subsequently, it would be maxed at 2.5% of that year's
Correct.
budget. So if the budget.
It's not the budget, it's the district assessment, which
The
is what
district
you raise,
assessment.
it's what you raise locally through taxes, plus the local tax. You add those two together and multiply it by 2.5%, and that's the number. Okay, it's the net assessment.
So,
Okay, so like we raise roughly $10,000, and then we add in the local tax. You add those together, 2.5, you get your 323 roughly. That number will change every year. And I'll send you something to show you how it works. And I'll use this year as the number so you can figure it out with the budget, because you're.
So this is something that would affect next year's budget,
It will
not
affect-
this year's budget that you just closed out, but
Correct,
next year's.
June of 15.
Was
Yep.
one of the warrant articles.
Yeah,
we
yeah, it was
voted
one of the
on,
warrant
but
articles in
Yep.
March, yeah.
I don't think anybody really realized that had a year delay in it when we did it until it happened.
Yep.
There's only certain expenditures out of that fund, correct?
Yes, that's correct. There's certain, you can either use it for emergency purposes in special education, okay? So in order to even use the money that comes from, or, one more, and to reduce taxes, okay? So in order to use the two, which is emergency expenditures or special ed, that has to get approved by the school board, and it has to get approved by a budget committee. Okay, the emergency one has to go one step further and actually goes to the commissioner. Okay, so there is a process in which you can use to get them funds, except for to reduce tax rate. That's obviously the school board's ultimate authority to say we want to use X amount of dollars to reduce tax rate. Similar to what the town does, but we're capped at 2.5%. They usually retain more than 8 to 11%, depending on the, yeah.
Isn't it not going to be a little bit more tied to the special ed budget, though? Because you're going to want to not you personally, the school board should be doing due diligence and paying attention to special education. So if we have a year where we have a big bump, there is that other money set aside.
We do have a trust fund as well.
Yes, we do. But
Yep.
did we not expend a lot of that this year?
We did not even touch the trust
We
funds
did
this
not
year.
trust our fund. Okay.
Nope, because we ended in the black.
Ah.
So we didn't have to touch any of the trust funds.
Okay.
But that's one of those, that's why I said it's really a discussion, because it depends on what's happening in that given year. We do have a special ed trust fund, but we could also use that money for special ed. That's one of the,
But it's a point well taken on this, the CIP, just to tie the two together. I mean, your trust funds on the school side should be similar to the capital funds, that you're building up money so that you don't have to put into this year's tax rate or operating expenses major capital, or in this case, if there's an unusual year with special ed like there was last year, if you had a sizable trust fund, you know, $500,000 because we salted it with $100,000 a year and didn't have to use it, then without having to change the tax rate, the school board could vote and say, let's take that extra 100 or 150 out of the special ed trust fund if we truly needed it this year, without impacting the tax rate. So I totally agree on the importance of building those funds to provide some flexibility to the two town council and the school board to handle, you know, emergencies or issues that flip up during the year.
there's one separate difference between what you'll find in the CIP. I just want to make sure you're aware. How the town raises their funds, they can actually put it in their budget. We cannot do that. The only way the school district can do it is through capital reserve funds, okay, a warrant article. Okay, so we can either use money from the fund balance, or we raise and we have to appropriate new money. But, so we don't put it in, it's not a line item in our budget like it is on the town.
It's not supposed to be anymore with the town. They found out after doing the charter revision this year that they should have been doing warrant articles
Okay.
and not including it as a, I mean, it didn't make any fiscal difference, but in theory, if last year we contributed $300,000 to CIP, this year, I think they actually have to do individual warrant articles for each of the funds.
The question was whether we would have a special election to allow us to do in the future what we've always been doing, thinking that was allowed. But the language, you know, the language had passed DRA review for multiple years, but I don't know whether it was a new person or whatever, but they said, no, that's not what the language in your charter allows. And therefore, the decision we made as a council at the last meeting was whether we wanted a special election to try to not change what we've always done, or whether we wanted to have this coming year, we will have a warrant for each of the CIP line items, and also a warrant article, so that we won't have to have 18 different warrant articles in the future. And that's what is decided, is that we will have, that will be a ballot, you know, something we'll do at the town meeting this year.
Can we discuss that? I don't know if anybody has an opinion. I just throw in, I would rather have capital separate from operating, so that voting on 15 different warrant articles would drive me insane. So I would certainly push to say have one warrant article that says we're going to contribute so much in capital this year. But I would say, just as like the school does, that operating is operating, and I hate to think we end up saying, gee, we have to go from 100,000 in capital contribution this year to $1 million next year, and therefore the operating budget looks like it's going up 900,000, rather than us making a conscious decision that says maybe we want to fund the road capital reserve and actually repair some roads on a more regular basis in town, which really should be a capital decision by the town, you know, is separately, saying operating is operating, but keep capital separate as something the voters vote on rather than hidden within the operating budget.
Those will be some good discussions when we get to those budgets.
Yeah, and as for the school board next year, I would hope that the school board, can't speak for everyone, obviously, but that when we make that decision to take that 2.5%, that it's not taking 2.5% because we can, but just being able to justify how much we take and why, so.
Do you think by taking that 2.5%, just hypothetically say we do that, I mean, the one thing, I'm thrilled that we have a $622,000 going back, but how do we get it a little tighter, and maybe that 2.5% will allow us to get that so that it's not, because, some of the things were totally unanticipated, totally get that. But, same thing we've been talking with the town is how do we get it just a little bit tighter to where we don't, it's a nice surprise. It'll be a nice surprise, but.
I wish I could tell you you'd see
Yeah,
that every
I
year,
know,
but you won't.
I know.
Well, and
You
more-
won't.
It's 2.5%, up to 2.5% if you have a surplus.
Yes.
So let's say
Right.
Yes.
next year.
They don't have a surplus.
They
Yeah,
only
we
have
could
a
have a surplus of
$200,000
$50,000, yeah.
surplus.
You can only keep up
They can
to.
only keep up to 200,000, which may be far below the
What they need.
2.5%, because that's all
Right.
it's about.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for the good news.
Well, you're very welcome. Answered all your questions.
Any other questions?
Have any
All
dates
right.
for CIP, the other
in budget
part
yet.
of the budget committee?
I know. I know. We're not into the serious
Do
stuff
you
yet.
know
no.
the dates that you have to get budgets ready?
I do not yet, no. Because it was to my surprise I didn't present the other night, just because of the time schedule you guys had with your dates, so. I don't know what's expected of us yet. How's that?
And I know in the past you've given us a little more detail at budget time. This was great as a one-sheet overview. If we wanted to get a layer down, like in what the capital funds were and where some of those variants you talked about, is there some summary report that supports this that you could provide us, or is it
Nope,
30,000
it's-
pages?
25 pages.
Oh, that's good.
Because it's kind of, the way the budget is, it's so many lines, so it's throughout. So I just run an analysis. I can share with you offline to get more down into the details if you prefer, anytime. I can email Dave, I can email you the trust funds, so you can see all the trust funds and what they earned and
Yeah,
what's
and
been
it's
expended.
more just in preparing us. If we looked at last year's, I don't know if anybody else would agree, it would sort of put you in the mood for what you're expecting on the line items in the budget. and where you
It was 68 pages. 25 pages is much better than 68 pages.
Well, that's just the budget report that I produce.
I understand.
The budget report is roughly, it's getting shorter because we've had some changes, and you'll see it this year, I think to your liking. So, well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
So as far as other business, that kind of goes to the meeting dates. So, anybody have a calendar near October? What's the fourth Monday? I believe it is the 20.
It is the 20th.
So Monday, October 20th.
I will be out of town. I am on a business
That'll be
trip.
the third Monday.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You're right, I'm sorry. My
Couldn't be
calendar
the
actually flips the other one over. It's 27th. I am here.
And I talked to Amy earlier.
And
I
I
think
drew.
that's, and then you drew on the wall. That's probably where we'll need to kind of start to set the cadence of November, December. I know that for the school board, I think they're presenting it on the 16th, and I know the town has to present by the 15th. Is that correct? Right around there, October 15th, Steve has to present his budget to the town.
I think Steve does it to the town council, and
Yeah,
then
and
they have a month to get it to the budget
So I
committee.
think we'll get it by November 15th, and then I think we get the school budget right before Thanksgiving, like probably the week before, the Monday before Thanksgiving, so I think it's the 23rd, somewhere around there, 24th. So we'll probably need to set kind of that cadence once we get into October, and hopefully we'll have more of those dates from them, because right now it's kind of in flux.
Okay, maybe we know more about where we're going with CIP by the next meeting as well, and can give a little better.
We've already set our budget deliberation meetings for the town council for October 25th and 29th.
October 25th, you're meeting on a Saturday?
We are.
Wow.
A whole day of fun.
Fun.
Missed
Line
it
by
last
line,
year.
fun.
Okay, so 25th and 29th. All right. So October 27th it is. Is that good with everyone?
6:30-ish?
6:30-ish. Any other business? Short and sweet. Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.
Told you it would be shorter than, told you it would be shorter than the town one.
Steve, if I understood it, Steve felt he didn't know.